Alright, we're back. Hope everybody had a good Sunday. Mine was busy. Uh, now let's wind down the weekend, unfortunately. We're gonna start doing some more story time. So, the latest short story has dropped for the Voices Within compilation of short stories that is the preludes to the next X Pack. Thrall centric story. I know we're all thrilled. Everybody loves green Moses. So, all right, let's get started. The young orc moved like a shadow through the palm fronds. The edge of the northern barrens was a beautiful place, countless trees heavy with fruit, the sound of songbirds calling above. The young orc had heard stories of how the night elf druid Neralex and others restored this once arid land to the stunning glory that now lay before him. That goes into Vanilla and into Kata about his story about how he was trying to save that land. And yet there was great danger here, for all that rampant green majesty. There were scars upon the land if one knew how to look. Old bones bleached white amid tangles of lush grass, broken blades, the rusted handles of war axes. The land remembered those who fought here, those who bled and died here. The orc expected it to feel like a graveyard. This was how his father had described it, but it did not carry that mournful melancholy. Sorry, that's on here. Of course, the cough starts right away. Instead, with each old weapon, each mark of fire on the oldest trees, he felt a sense of wonder. I'm walking through the history of my people, he mused. It was not the kind of thought he usually had. There was weight of truth in it, as though he was on the verge of some greater understanding. As close to it as to the beast he now stalked. Something new, trying to bloom in the soil of his soul. Hang on one second, I'm sorry. My allergies decided to start up just right now. Alright. He climbed atop the cracked boulder and squatted there, his hands automatically moving to touch his blades. Being alone out here was entirely different than he had expected. Long before he even left home for his first leg of the Amgora, he had been filled with excitement in all its many forms. The bravado that boiled in his chest when announcing to his parents he was ready, the thrill of the hunt, the delight in taking the first step towards acceptance, the hope of earning the next blessing after this one. But now those feelings have faded. Not gone, but receded to a shadowy distance in his heart and mind. He felt the change happen slowly. The anticipation of the Amgora lasted still, but the fires beneath it had banked. The fear was there, of course. He was young, but not foolish. Now what he felt, he was certain, was a sense of awe. Perched atop this boulder, hearing the wind rustling the ferns pressing in on either side of him, staring down toward the gaping maw of the wailing caverns, he felt as if 10,000 orcs stood all around him. He was in their company, even if most were lost to time and battle. Some, he knew, had failed trying to complete this exact rite, here on this rock or within the thick darkness of the caverns. He felt them. He was them. And on some level he realized that this was likely his first real insight as an orc. Not as a warrior in training, but as one who might one day serve his people, should he live long enough to achieve that honor. Strange that even though he grasped his weapons, Knowing a fight lay ahead that could only end in death, he could not feel any hate or bloodlust in his heart. He felt only peace, a kind of calm. "I accept death," he thought, and then he corrected that phrasing. "I accept that I can die." It was new to him, and he marveled at it, turning it over in his mind. "I might die today. I might kill today. We may both die, the beast and I, and that is okay. Natural." These were not the thoughts of a youngling. They were edging very close to the musings of an orc grown. He smiled, and for a long moment he was pleased with it and with all it might mean. And then from the mouth of the wailing caverns came a sound that swept all philosophy and introspection away. A roar, deep, hungry, primal. The youngling's mouth suddenly went dry as dust. His hands touched his weapons again, and now the youth, the boy, was back. And he was terrified, longing to be reunited with his armor. That feral, bestial cry came from the thing that he had been hunting. A monster who had killed not just the many young orcs who had failed to best it during their own rights, but also many battle-tested orcs and passing adventurers. The monster had littered the oasis with their bones and broken blades. Trigor the Lasher. The Hydra bellowed out its cry to tell the upstart young orc that it knew he was there. It was waiting for him, and he was ready. Ready to kill the beast and bring back proof to his people, to his family. "I'm coming for you!" The young orc tried to summon all his courage and stand as tall and proud as an orc should. But his heart hammered in his chest, and the hands that gripped his axe and dagger went slick with sweat. Still he headed down the slope, desperate to ignore the claw marks right through the dirt and at the opening of the caverns. Being in motion seemed to help his faltering courage. Moving was itself an act of bravery, of purpose. He began to grin as the first flickers of anticipation ignited in his chest. "I'm coming for you," he said again, quietly this time. His pace quickened as he left the sunlit plains behind and allowed the darkness of the caverns to envelop him. Before he could get his bearings, another blood-chilling roar ripped from the throat of the monster. The glint of slitted eyes appeared far, far above. The Hydra struck out with razor-sharp talons. The orc dodged the attack and swung his axe. "The death of that youngling marks another loss to the Horde," said Thrall as they left the council meeting at Grommash Hold. The council had been a grim one, where the main topic was the death of a young orc who had gone out on his Amgora, but was clearly not yet ready. That morning a party of warriors had borne his body, torn and cold, back into the city. Thrall and Agra strolled down one of the many long dirt roads of Orgrimmar, heading in the direction of home, though neither was in any hurry to get there, or anywhere. It was a fine afternoon, with a warm sun and a mild breeze stirring the leaves on the trees and the banners on the outer walls. Inside those defenses, shadows pooled between the homes and buildings, and the savory smells from scores of cook fires wafting through the open windows. And yet, for all that, their hearts were heavy. "Another life taken by Trigor," mused Thrall darkly. "Why so many young orcs have chosen to try to track and kill that particular beast is a mystery to me. But I am heartened to know that the Horde will still rally to support the next attempts of our younglings." Agra gave a sad smile. "It will take a great orc to beat such a beast," she paused. "Durak is becoming quite the young warrior, you know. You refused him last season, but he'll be ready soon." Thrall did not meet her eyes. "I would never allow our son to track that monster." "You think him weak?" Agra asked sharply. Thrall set his jaw in a hard line. "Weak? No, never. But the Amgora is not to be undertaken lightly, as we have just seen." "Durak is as strong as any of his age, stronger than most," insisted Agra. "Not arguing," Thrall assured her. In truth, he was shaken by the sight of the dead youngling. He looked around. "But speaking of Durak, where is our boy?" "Rez said he went fishing again," Agra said. He has a knack for coaxing the mackerel up to his line. We'll eat well tonight. Thrall paused, then picked up the thread of their conversation. Pains my heart to hear tales of our own taken by right meant to uplift our young. Agra laughed. Says the wise and mighty orc who helped bring this practice into the ways of the Horde. Thrall nodded. While that is true, I don't have to like its every outcome. They walked a few paces before he sighed and added, There are times I yearn for my early days as war chief. No, don't look at me like that. I love what we have built here, and I would never want to go back, but it felt different. Or, said Agra, perhaps, wise as you are, you don't relate to what these younglings need to do in order to understand their strength and claim their power. After all, you were raised by humans. You did not complete such rites at that age. You had great battles to fight, a sea of injustices set before you. Your rights were in forging a better world, and in doing so, you have become who you are now. He nodded again, taking her point. I do envy the opportunity these younglings have had since birth. Of course. Am I satisfied with how far our people have come? Yes. Especially after Garrosh, after Sylvanas. Yeah, Garrosh is your fault, buddy. So what troubles you now, Amosh? He glowered, but it crumbled into a rueful smile. As a leader, a shaman, a father, I see this world as better, and yet, for all I've sought peace, sometimes I fear a world free from war. If Durak and Rez come of age in a peaceful world, will they know why we fought? Have wisdom enough to recognize injustice, evil, cruelty when they see it? Possess the courage, the strength to face it? Even now I spend most of my time roaring and thundering in council meetings. I can hardly remember the last time I hefted a weapon. He grunted as they passed a group of younglings dressed as self-styled heroes, wrapped in war cloaks made from tattered banners and helms of battered old cooking pots. They chased each other with swords and axes fashioned from dried palm fronds. While Durak was getting too old for those kinds of games. Among them was their youngest, Rez, who squealed as another young orc chased her, but then pivoted to deliver a clever backward slash that caught her pursuer across the stomach. That, he said, pointing, that's what I really want to be doing. What? Making war again? There was a devious twinkle in his eye. Of a kind. With that, he threw back his head and uttered a war cry, snatched a branch free from a brush, and ran at the children, brandishing it like a weapon of legend. The youngling shrieked, and Rez, seeing her father, whirled and faced them all, holding her own mock weapon high. We are beset by an ogre, she cried, rallying them, even the ones she was fighting a moment ago. Where is Durak? Growled Thrall. What have you done with my firstborn, you monsters? Rez stood firm in his path. Durak is gagged and bound and is our rightful prisoner. Ye shall not find nor free him, for we sacrifice him tonight. He is ours by right of conquest. Thrall loomed above them, menacing. Free my son or feel my wrath? Feel mine! Rez bellowed. Orcs of the Horde, to me! With her own battle cry, Rez led the charge, meeting Thrall in the middle of the street. Do you accept defeat? Do you submit? She demanded. Before he could reply, she leapt onto him and bore him backwards. And then, with all the younglings were climbing over the great champion, toppling him, whacking him ferociously with their weapons. Agra stood there laughing. She called out battle tactics, not to her partner, but to Rez and her own little horde. Now that's a good mom. Later, soundly defeated, Thrall sat on the edge of a stone well, tenderly probing all the sore places where little fists and feet, elbows and knees, sticks and claws have landed their mark. Agra sat beside him as Rez ran off with the relentless energy of the young to start a new game that sent half the younglings running off, while the others chased them. I'm getting too old for this, said Thrall, wincing at a particularly painful bruise on his ribs. You love it, and don't claim otherwise, countered Agra, giving him a sharp but affectionate elbow to those same ribs. Rez takes after you, that's for sure, he complained. Lovely as a spring morning, but fierce as a wolf with a bad tooth. He watched the game ebb and flow, losing track of the goals as the rules continued to change. With a grunt for the effort, he and Agra rose and headed down a side street where vendors had set up rows of stalls. There were weavers and metalsmiths, coopers and cartwrights, artists and growers of every colorful fruit and aromatic herb. They browsed more than shopped, pausing now and then to talk to friends new and old. Many wanted to talk about the youngling who had died, and it was Agra who engaged in those conversations, dissecting the situation, speculating on whether a party should be assembled to go after Trigor, or if the glory should be left to a worthy challenger. Thrall was content to listen. His heart was not drawn to such talk that day. When her friends had dispersed, Agra resumed the conversation. You once told me how dearly Varrock prized honor. What was it he said? Honor, young heroes. Never forsake it. Yes, said Thrall, surprised by the comment that seemed to come out of nowhere. He was certainly right about that. She studied his face. Maybe that is what you yearn for your younglings. Honor. Something easy to claim in a just battle. Perhaps, he shook his head, but something with an equally high cost. Agra took his hand and led him out on the side street and onto a quiet lane beyond that wandered between a row of stables. War has cost me much, said Thrall. Ogrim and Gromash, Cairn, Varrock, Vol'jin. I often long for their guidance, friendship, understanding, but they are lost to me. Now I lead alongside their children, their successors, while I worry about how to prepare my own. All that they gave lives within you now. The memory of it, yes, but there are many times I wish the spirits I miss dearly would heed my call for counsel. Time has been generous. It has given me you, Durak, Rez, the Horde, but it has also emptied the world of so many who deserve to live, to learn who they were beyond the field battle. I feel robbed at times. Does that make sense? Of course it does. Agra was often fierce even in her humor, but though not at that moment. But you are here now, thundering in your council meetings, shaping a new generation to battle with words and ideas, as well as axes and arrows. The Horde will grow stronger for your wisdom, and the wisdom of those who have made their mark on you. I know you will lead our people to greater heights, because I see how you have molded our younglings, and that is how I know Durak is ready for his Amgora. Thrall leaned forward and touched his forehead to hers, a gentle act. She was surprised and resisted for a mere splinter of a moment. Then she leaned into it, sharing the moment. His brow was swollen, a blow from Rez's pointy little elbow. Thrall winced and laughed. Love hurts, said Agra, then hugged him. But its echoes are all around us. Our ancestors, our lost friends, they ripple through us, as our axe will ripple forward when we are gone. You are here still, and for that we are all glad. They shared a smile before resuming their meandering walk through Orgrimmar. Honor includes caution, said Agra. I understand why you have pushed Durak to begin preparations for his Amgora, but you can't protect him forever. I know that, Thrall said, nostrils flaring, but he's still young. There are those in this town who are younger than him, but who've already taken the rights. And more than a few of them are dead, said Thrall. The Amgora is to be undertaken for glory or to prove oneself. It is a pledge to serve, honor, and safeguard our people, and to know all that means. I know Durak is of age, but he is not ready. He will be, but for now he thinks it's all about being tough and brave, and that is such a small part of what he'll need to succeed. Agra gestured to some of the older children in the yard. Some of his friends have already achieved their rights. That weighs on him. I know. And there are whispers of some doing so without their parents' blessing. Thrall huffed. I know that too, which is why I'm glad Durak is wise enough to listen to us. So far, said Agra. A day may come when he will not wait. That reminds me, she added. Rez has been after you to explain the Amgora to her. She's jealous that Durak has got the talk last winter. Thrall nodded. I shall take her for a walk when we get home. It's easier to speak away from everyone. He let out a belabored sigh. Our young ones will learn the realities of our life soon enough. Battles and glory may make us strong, but we're stronger knowing why we fight, what we've lost, and who we're fighting for. He paused for a long moment and then added, It took me a long time to understand that and many other things Varric said. The insight was there all the time. You didn't learn it all from Varric. Agra gave him a light jab. Don't belittle my Amosh. Your Amosh has had more than his fair share of days of boneheaded bravado. Well, boneheaded. You're not wrong there, she conceded, and they both smiled. Above them, the sun was a golden ball rolling slowly across the hard blue dome of the sky. There were a few puffy clouds sailing like a fleet of ships out on the far horizon. A flock of gulls coasted along on the air currents, angled so they seemed to hang unmoving in the sky. The giggles of the younglings filled their ears. At least our younglings are smart and brave, said Thrall, and they both have heart and brains. They take after their mother in all the important ways, said Agra airily. This I will not refute, said Thrall, and that was as far as he got because something small and very powerful came out of nowhere and raised her faux weapon at him. Show me your strength or die screaming, Raptor Dun! He looked down into the ferocious glaring eyes of his youngest child. I yield! And so you should, cried Ruz, for I am a fierce warrior of the Horde. With that, she gave her father a crinkling smile, then put her fists on her hips in an unconscious imitation of her mother. Thrall, grinning, stared at his wife and his daughter. They looked so alike and wore the same fierce, glowering look, the same flashing eyes. Father, can you tell me of the Amgora? I want to learn everything about war and killing the enemy and hunting beasts and all of it. Thrall shook his head. Then, off Agra's head tilt, he conceded, Yes, let us walk. Walk where? Anywhere. Just the walk so we can talk in private. Rez nodded vigorously. Let me say this first, little bug, he said. The Amgora is not about war or killing. It is about learning what it means to be an orc. It's about learning how to be strong, yes, but also how to honor our ancestors, how to live in harmony with the elements. Rez stared up at him, half smiling as if he had made a joke, expecting a punchline after his words. Thrall caught Agra's amused expression. I'll go start on dinner. I'm sure Durak will be home soon, said Agra. You two enjoy your walk. I think your father has a lot to tell you. The creature's talons were little more than a moving shadow against the deeper blackness of the caverns. They came so fast that the young orc dodged almost too late. He threw himself down, rolled sideways, and sprang back to his feet, hoping for an advantage, but the darkness was so intense he saw nothing. He circled, trying to find it. There was a movement, and once again it was black upon black, and he did not know if he was before or behind the monster. Then it struck again. This time pain exploded across the orc's right side, and he staggered. But even as he lost balance, he saw a bit of its muscular shoulder, the curl of a wicked mouth, and the gleam of one merciless eye. Terrified, the orc fought for balance and twisted, shuffling sideways to bring both his weapons up as he backed away toward the bright sunlight of the cavern's entrance. He swung a backhanded blow with the axe and felt the blade strike something that yielded, but there was no death scream. The orc stumbled backward and then followed him. The creature was heavy, moving without hurry, either sure of its prey or cautious because of the blow it had just been dealt. Its breath came out as a ragged hiss, and the very ground seemed to tremble with its every step. The young orc smelled blood in the close air of the cavern. Some of it he knew was his own, but bigger than that, overpowering, was the stench of blood mixed with something like sulfur. Things crunched underfoot that were unmistakably bones. Come at me, he said in a low growl. Soon the orc stepped backward out into the sunlight and settled into a fighting stance, knees bent for balance, weapons crossed before him, body crouched to avoid giving the beast an easy opening. Come on, he snarled. He came. One foot stepped gingerly out of the darkness, poised like one of the big hunting cats, though as far larger. The creature stalked forward on two legs as big around as tree trunks, wrapped in scales that overlapped like plates of battle armor. There were countless scars on its legs from other young orcs who had failed to kill it during their rites. The orc swallowed hard but did not retreat. Come on, he goaded. Show your face! The hydra took another slow step, moving from utter darkness into a glare of an unrelenting sun. Its claws gouged lines in the hard-panned ground, and then it reared its heads. All three of them. The orc's blood turned to ice in his veins. Three faces glowered down at him from atop long, muscular necks. Each was as hideous as the next, with crusts of spikes arising from a reptilian pate. Scaly lips peeled back from rows of serrated teeth, the smallest of which was as long and sharp as the orc's dagger. The young orc could actually feel the heat of its 6 eyes. Real heat, piercing and deadly. In the light of day, the orc could more clearly see that the creature's scaly body was crisscrossed with many scars drawn by sword and axe. Trigor the Lasher had fought many battles and had won them all. Every single one. The hydra took another step forward, and now he could see its tail, thick, long, and ending in a cluster of spikes like those on its head. It reared up on 2 massive legs and split the air with 3 dreadful shrieks. It was at that moment that the young orc summoned his courage. This was what he had come all this way for. This battle. This fight. The Amgorod demanded that an orc prove their courage, but the young orc felt his faltering. Still, he knew he had to prove himself. Having set out on this quest, it would be humiliating to return in failure. That would cast a shadow over his life forever. It would be better to not return at all. The realities of the moment cast their own shadow, though. He battled his own doubts and fears, while the creature was absolute in its own power, and in the knowledge that it had survived every one who had ever come hunting. Every single one. All of this was a raging storm in the young orc's mind. With a cry of mingled fear and rage, he leapt forward, driving straight at the monster, feigning high with the dagger to distract and swinging his axe in a sidearm blow that was powered by all his muscle, every bit of his training, and every ounce of his bravery. The blade bit deep and blood exploded outward, and it did him no damn good at all. The next scream to fill the plains was his own. Thrall and Rez walked through the gates of Orgrimmar and left the city far behind. It was cool in the shadows beneath the trees, and adders slithered out of their way but stopped to watch them pass. Rez smiled at it with innocent joy that touched her father's heart. "It's nice to have some time alone, little bug," said Thrall. "We don't get to talk much. You're either pestering Durak, hiding from your mother at chore times, or ambushing your poor old father." "I beat you today," she cried. "You did," he agreed and tousled her hair. She swatted his hand away, giggling as she did so. The arid land soon gave way to canyons made of red rocks that seemed to catch fire in the setting sun. With the haze rising in front of them, the crimson cliffs rippled and steamed. It was drier out here than in the city, the heat less oppressive. Spiny lizards and dung beetles scuttled across rocks, and a seagull wheeled lazily far above it all. They walked for nearly half an hour without saying much, and instead seeing and hearing all that the natural world had to share. Thrall could feel his daughter growing calmer, losing that youthful agitation that always made her seem like there were 10 of her. Now she strolled beside him with something akin to patience. "Father," she asked for a while. "Yes?" "Will you tell me about the Amgora?" "Yes, but why are you worrying over such a thing?" She looked away for a moment. "I'm not worrying. I just want to know more about it. Hearthog's older brother is planning to go out soon, even though that other orc just got killed, and it's all Durok's been talking about. I know what people say and all, but that's not the same as knowing what it means. It's not the same as knowing why we do it. He glanced down at her. The request, though framed with child's vocabulary, was a profound one, was insightful, demonstrating depth of character. Tell me what you know, he suggested. She thought about that for a minute as they banked down a hill. I know there are 3 parts to it, she said. 3 blessings, yes. One about learning to respect the spirits of nature and the elements, and one about honoring our ancestors, and the 3rd, proving straight by hunting, I think. Thrall nodded. Yes to all 3. And no. Huh? Let's take them one by one. Let's start with the blessing of the land. I don't really know what that means, admitted Ruz as they passed beneath the little amount of shade provided by some palm trees here and there. No one talks much about it, or about the blessing of the ancestors. All the other younglings talk about is the right to kill beasts. Not surprising. Hunting can be a lot of fun, and it builds character and skills. And the blessing of the clan has more exciting stories that get told more often. But between you and me, there's more to learn in the other blessings. What do you mean? He nodded his approval and sat down beside her. The world in which we live in is more than this, he said, gesturing to the sea, the fish, the arid land. There are layers of reality everywhere, magic of many kinds. We who are called to be shaman naturally look deeper into the world. Rez's eyes widened in interest, urging him to go on. He put a hand onto her shoulder. Close your eyes. Listen. Feel. What do you notice? They sat in silence for a time. He guided her fingers to the soil, digging her fingers in. There was a steady breeze that carried the sound of wildlife to them, the scent of the earth. There was a moisture in the deeper layers of the soil. The sun radiated heat down on them. Rez smiled. She was always one for finding beauty in the simplest things, from a squealing piglet to a falling tree that housed 1,000,000 insects, flourishing in the rotten timber. Thrall wondered, not for the first time, if she had a shaman's path in her future. Thrall looked around at the river and the sea, the hills and the arid landscape. The natural world blossoms where the elements meet. The elements find their own rhythm and harmony together. It isn't always calm, but even in turbulence they find balance. He paused then, urging Rez to open her eyes, and continued. But then we move in. He pointed to the city in the distance. We need to hunt for food, cut down trees to build our homes, plant fields for crops. We impose ourselves on the land so we can live, but if we take too much of it, we can throw the natural world out of balance. Every orc must understand that we live in harmony with nature and with the infinite elemental spirits that share this world with us. It is something to be joyful about, but it's also something that requires us to be vigilant and strong if we are to safeguard it. And it's the reason we honored the land through the Amgora. Rez gave a lot of thought. They accidentally flushed a family of gulls from a nest in the tall grass and watched them fly away, scolding in their bird voices. I'm too small for the Amgora, she said. Is there anything I can do now? Little things, said Thrall. But even little things add up over time. Picking up debris left by some careless other will matter. You can plant 2 new trees for each one our people cut down. You can take only what you need instead of treating resources as free and limitless. Do you understand? She nodded, her eyes wide and thoughtful again. In these acts and others, we show our respect and gratitude to the land. This calls to the spirits of nature and bring them into our lives as welcome guests. During this part of the Amgora, the youngling goes to a shaman and asks that these spirits make themselves known, so that they might offer guidance to aid the land. A true shaman works in harmony with the spirits and the elements, he went on. They might restore the presence of nature to a place sundered by battle or till manure into soil whose richness has been farmed out. These mundane tasks don't feel glorious, but they do great good. They nourish our world and our people. And done with an open heart, they cultivate humility. Do you know what that is? Sure, said Rez. It means not thinking everything's just about you. He gently tapped the top of her head. You are a very, very clever bug. And what's the blessing of our ancestors about? She asked. Thrall molded over for a moment. We orcs owe much to those who have come before us. If it was not for their courage, their vision, and their many sacrifices, we would not be the people we are now. We would have no safe homes. We would be consumed by anger and the thirst for pain and blood. He shook his head. Without understanding and honoring our ancestors, we could not truly value all that we have. Okay, but my friend Speartwig told me something about cooking. How does that honor the ancestors? Thrall smiled. Some orcs have prepared a feast in honor of their ancestors, but there are other ways to honor their memory and their legacy. We might tell their stories. Spread the lessons they learned far and wide for the betterment of all. We may right some wrongs they did, but not have the opportunity to resolve in life, carry on in their work. We can care for each other, as those gone once cared for us. Humility, kindness, benevolence, compassion, he said. These skills are more difficult to learn than swinging an axe, and yet they matter more to the longevity of our people. Even the sacred meals your Speartwig spoke of demand much knowledge of herbs, when something is safe to eat according to the calendar of its growing. To orcs obsessed with combat, this may seem silly, and yet it is the heartbeat of our kind. It is what makes the Horde a community worth living in and fighting for. Rez bent to pick a flower and then stopped. She crouched down, looking at it instead. Tell me what you're thinking, coaxed Thrall. It's bruiseweed, she said slowly. Thrall waited. If I pick it because it's pretty, it just dies, doesn't it? Yes. Well, Mother said that bruiseweed is what some of the other folks take for when their joints ache. Mother makes a paste out of it and puts it on cuts and scrapes. And sometimes she rubs it on me or Durak if we get a rash. All of this is true. I can look at it and see how pretty it is, says Ruz. But I don't have to pick it. Someone else might need it for medicine. Thrall once more felt his heart lift. She understands, he thought with great love and pride. Rez stood slowly and turned to look at him. He expected a smile, but saw none. Instead, there was a faintness of unease in her eyes that he struggled to define. Was it because of all the weight and responsibilities of the long lesson? Tell me about the other rite. That's the hunting one. The blessing of the clan, he supplied. Come, let's sit beneath the palms and watch the water. There are these little fishes that sleep in the dried mud for months, and then they wake up when it rains. We'll see if we find any. They sat and watched the waters of a small river ambling toward the sea, sunlight sparkling on the tiny wavelets. We orcs need to be strong, and we need to be tough, able to fight, to hunt, to protect our families. But that isn't the reason for that rite of Angora. It just looks like it from a distance. Thrall pointed down the stream. Tell me what you see. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and really looked. I see pebbles. There's a blue one and some green ones. What else? I see an old buckle someone must have lost. And? Ooh! She cried with sudden delight. There's a fish! It's purple with a pink tummy. Perfect. Now, if you just walk past the stream and look quickly, then all you would have seen is the water. But when you observe with patience, you see so much more. He looked at her. Do you understand the lesson in that? Rez thought about it, still watching the water, and then she nodded. I think so. Then how might that apply to the blessing of the clan? She hummed at that, and it delighted Thrall that it was clear that she was thinking it through. You're saying that I only know about Amgora from a distance. I'm hearing about it, looking at it, but I'm not seeing it. Thrall smiled and gestured toward the north. From a distance, the horde looks like warriors, fighters, killers. We prize strength of arms, hold passion for combat, but only someone looking and not seeing would think that it's because we treasure war. But we do treasure war. It's how the horde has won all its battles, isn't it? Thrall smiled grimly at that. The horde has won many battles and lost many too. Not all of them on the field of war, said Thrall, patient. The strength we orcs acquire by hard training, by dangerous rites like the blessing of the clan, through warfare with enemies who must be fought, is not what defines us. It is not the bloodshed that we seek anymore. Then I don't understand. Thrall nodded. We have how many pigs in our yard? Huh? Pigs? Oh, 17. And old Vigra is about to drop a litter. Correct. And we raise pigs for food, yes? Yes, she said cautiously. Rose was not at all a fan of killing any of the family's livestock, and sometimes wept bitterly when a pig was slaughtered. You know that we must do this or else we'll go hungry. Sure, we can eat vegetables and grains, but we eat meat too. That means we have to kill the animals we raise. I hate that. I know, said Thrall kindly. But you eat the meat all the same. She said nothing. When your mother or Durek or I kill an animal, do you think we do it out of hatred? No. Does it mean we think nothing for those animals? No, but I guess we have to. Why? Well, like you said, we have to eat meat. Exactly, said Thrall. Violence is sometimes necessary. We kill livestock for food. We fish the waters for food. We hunt the lands for food. Have you ever heard an orc curse at any animal that's being killed for these reasons? Rez shook her head. Of course not. But all the fighters in the city talk of killing enemies. They even sing songs about it. She spoke true of a long tradition among the orcs, Oloktra, songs that told the glories of battle and of great wars dating back through time. Rez knew the lyrics to many of them and often sang these war songs when she played. Durek, on the other hand, favored Lokvednod, orc words, Lokvednod, song of orc heroes. The difference mattered, as Thrall saw it. His son was on the edge of adulthood, and that was a personal thing, as heroism is personal. Whereas for Rez, such things were really an abstraction, and at her age, it was easier to play at war than want to be a hero. Sure, he said, but we do not sing to idolize violence. We sing to carry forward the memory of injustice, to honor those brave enough to meet it with steel. I pray you won't live to see such evil, but the songs of our people may grant you the wisdom to know what to do if you must face it. At this she beamed. Strike it down! Exactly, he said again. Now listen. It is important for younglings to undertake a quest for the blessing of the clan, and more importantly to do it without friends or family watching. No one to cheer them on. No one to come and save them. They must learn how strong they are. It is a very important truth that the horde is only as strong as those who serve it. In war, one poor soldier can cause a line of battle to falter. A weak link can break the strongest chain. She nodded, engrossed by what he was saying. Thrall wanted to hug her close, to tell her to stop growing so that he might protect her always. But he knew too well the importance of the lesson. A lesson his own parents had not lived long enough to impart to him. The blessing of the clan is no easy thing for a youngling. It's frightening to be alone and to know that their survival depends solely on what they do. They might find themselves moving through unknown terrain, seeking resources like food, water, and shelter while spending days tracking the beast. This requires intelligent observation and equally intelligent decision-making. And when the beast is confronted, they have to fight and kill it. This proves they can do that they can overcome something bigger, stronger, possibly wiser, certainly more experienced, and many times more dangerous. So much is learned by that. Rez shuddered, looking askance. Some get killed. Some orcs, I mean, like... She trailed off rather than name the orc lad who lay dead back in the city. Thrall understood the hesitation some, especially the very young, had for naming the dead aloud. Thrall thought of that morning's council meeting. Yes, he said, some die, and that is a sad and terrible thing. It's a loss to their families and to the entire horde. We all grieve, but at the same time we learn from what happened. Did the orc go out too soon? Were they properly trained? Had they not only heard the advice of the elders, but heeded it, understood it? And those who knew someone who died gained deeper, although painful, knowledge of how the loss of a single family member can weaken our people. Then why risk it at all? You tell me. She took a long time sorting through that one. Again, Thrall did not interrupt. In a way, this was practice for her own Umgora, because it was letting her discover her own insights. Parenting, he mused privately, was as difficult and demanding as being a warrior, maybe more so. Rez finally summoned the words she sought. Because the next orc who goes out will maybe wait until they're older, she said cautiously. Thrall nodded in approval and twisted a thick finger to encourage her to go deeper. And because they know that risking their life risks the horde too. Indeed. They lost the orc and all that orc could have been, agreed Thrall. All that orc might have become. Rez looked at him and then away. You were a slave, she said in a very small voice. You were there when the orcs were prisoners and kept in camps, but you overcame that. You fought for yourself and everyone else. I wouldn't even be here, or Durak, or maybe the whole horde. You saved everyone a bunch of times, but if you had died a youngling, it was a shockingly wise insight for a child, and Thrall could hear the clear echo of Agra's wisdom and Rez. That made his heart swell with pride and with love. It has been my honor to serve our people, in war and in peace, he said. Rez stood straight, a twinkle of mischief in her eye. Suddenly the maturity was gone from her face as she adopted a haughty, regal expression. And now you will serve me! Kneel! Thrall immediately dropped to one knee and bowed his head, spreading his arms wide in supplication. I bow to you, war chief Amarez, chieftain of the orcs of Azeroth, benevolent mistress of all she surveys, mistress of beasts and birds and all things that walk, fly, wriggle, climb, crawl, and wallow, overlord of quill beasts, squisher of toads, tamer of zebra, tickler of wolves, official despiser of hog stew, grand deflator of swellfish, and midnight procurer of biscuits from the secret stash of the Farseeker Agrelin the Almighty. To you I bow in humility and deference. Rez tried to maintain her imperial haughtiness, but the silliness snuck past her resolve and she collapsed into laughter. Thrall caught her and they tumbled to the grass together. They stopped laughing to gaze up, and Thrall held her close. Clouds tumbled across the sky above them, each one looking like some rare animal. For a few minutes, when their laughter had finally dwindled, they began pointing to one or another, calling out what they looked like. Most of Thrall's observation were for rare animals, while Rez pointed to a very fat one and said it looked like her father after a feast. Thrall considered for a moment, lips pursed, and Rez paused as if she had gone too far. But Thrall said, I can see it. They laughed again, but it didn't last long as the fingers of twilight pulled the sun toward the west. Father, said Rez, her tone growing serious again, what we were talking about, you being a slave, having no family growing up, no good times like we have. and now having to be a shaman and represent everything else for our people. What about it? She sat up and stared at him with huge eyes. That's a lot to carry. He got to his feet and pulled her up too. Yes, conceded Thrall. But every orc of the Horde needs to be able to carry the burdens of protecting our people and providing for them. That is why the Amgora exists, to show that the strength of our people can't be measured by having killed or even having won a battle. Our people's strength is built on war. Is that why you told Durak that he wasn't ready yet? Said Rez flatly. Because he thinks he is about being tough and being able to kill monsters? Yes. He wasn't happy about it, and I don't think he's ready to understand something so important. That's why your mother and I suggested he wait. But he's a good son, and he has something greater than courage. He has heart. That will count for much when his time does come. Yes, she said, and then looked away. He saw a shadow cross Rez's face, and she turned farther away. When she did not turn around, Thrall asked, "What is it? What is stealing your joy?" Rez spoke in a small and fragile voice. Truth. It was said with heavy emotion that Thrall tried to understand. Worry, for sure, but also sadness, regret, and was it shame? Little bug, he said, you must tell me what's wrong. You were full of glee one moment, and now you look wretched. I made a promise not to tell, she said. If it is a promise that will do no harm, then keep it, said Thrall after a moment's consideration. But if that promise is a dangerous one, then tell me. Without turning, she said, the orc who died, Benji, I saw him when they brought him in. He was all cut up. His father turned away from him, but I don't know if it was because of how bad he looked or because he failed to kill the thing that did that to him. Of course Benji failed. He went after Trigor the Lasher, and it is too fierce for so young an orc to face. Trigor has killed many grown orcs and horde warriors, Alliance too. No one blames the boy for failing, not even his father. More likely his father was grieving because his son may have gone out too soon. Many of us parents share that fear. After all, how can we ever know if sending our younglings out for these rites will help them grow or end their lives? A sob broke in Rez's chest, and her body began to tremble. Thrall took her by the shoulders and gently turned her around. Amarez, he said now, invoking her full name. What is it? You must tell me. It's Durak. What about him? Are you worried that he will face Trigor next year when he goes out for his Amgora? I won't permit it, but father, Durak has gone out. Thrall rose all the way to his marrow. What? He demanded. That's why he's not around today. Benji was his friend, and Durak was so mad that Trigor killed him. He went out just after dawn to hunt the Hydra and kill it himself. For Benji. Then to prove he's ready for his rites. No, breathed Thrall as his icy terror gripped him. No, no, no! Even as he spoke, he rose up, grabbed Rez, and began running back towards the city. The journey to the Wailing Caverns was far, but they were upon Moonpaw, and the great wolf seldom tired during great times of great exertion. 3 of Thrall's most trusted orc warriors rode with him, and Agra galloped beside Moonpaw and another huge bar wolf. Even so, the sun was edging toward the horizon and threw long shadows behind it. Will he be okay? Cried Rez. But Thrall, fearing what words of panic and terror would escape him, said nothing. There was a pain in his chest that felt like an arrow had been shot through his heart. They passed through Durotar and onto the northern barrens. They sped past the crossroads and rode hard for the large brown mountain behind it. Pressing on, taking shortcut paths they knew, racing against the setting sun. It seemed to take forever, but then the gray walls of the Wailing Caverns rose out of the twilight room. From far away they saw someone sprawled in the dirt, sitting with their back against a boulder, legs splayed, arms slack. The dying sunlight painted the figure, and Thrall feared that the bloody red he saw was not all from the sun. He had been on enough battlefields to know a grave wound from any distance. "Durak!" cried Rez, and both father and daughter leapt from Moonpaw's back and raced like the wind down the slope to the mouth of the caverns, Agra close on their heels. As they drew near, their hearts began to break, for the figure was indeed covered with gore. The orc warriors fanned out, blades drawn, eyes fierce and blazing. Thrall, Agra, and Rez cried out in horror as they saw that the shape before them was indeed Durak. But soon the image of death and destruction seemed to undergo a strange process of change. At 50 yards they were looking at the corpse of Durak smeared with his own lifeblood. But at 15 yards, a new truth emerged. Durak sat on the ground with his back to the rock. His clothes were slashed and torn, and he bled from a score of cuts, some deep and terrible. His face was painted with blood, yet it was not the dark red, nearly black blood of an orc. No, this was something much brighter. It was truly painted. The marks were crooked and sloppy, but there was an order to them, a pattern. The bright red blood on his face matched the dark red on the fingers of his hands, and that ignited the smallest spark of hope. One bloody hand gripped the edge of the rock, and with a great effort of will, Durak rose to his feet. He stood there, bloody, swaying, but alive. Thrall reached out to him first, but Durak did not embrace him. As if performing a conjurer's trick, the young orc instead reached down behind the rock and lifted something. It was horrifying, dreadful to see, and yet it filled Thrall's heart with joy. It was one of the severed heads of the Hydra, the most dreaded beast, Trigor the Lasher. "My boy!" cried Thrall. "What have you done?" Durak looked at his father and mother. "So, now will you let me do the Umgora?" Durak gestured weakly with his other hand, and behind him, barely visible in the shadows of the cavern's mouth, were two more huge lumps of flesh, gristle and spikes. Sightless green eyes stared up at the sky. I wanted to show you," wheezed Durak. "Father, I wanted to show you that I'm ready." Thrall took Durak gently into his powerful embrace and pressed his forehead to his son's. Agra leaned in to join them. Rez took one of Durak's hands and held it tightly, pressing it to her chest. "My son," Thrall finally said, his voice filled with wonder, with pride and love. "Do you know what you've done?" "I killed the monster, father," whispered the boy. "I wanted to make you proud, to show you that I can serve our people with honor. You said I wasn't ready for my Umgora, but I wanted to show you that I am." "Durak, you slew a creature many grown orcs and others have failed to destroy, attained vengeance for your friend, and protected more younglings from a terrible fate. I have never thought you weak or unworthy. No, I just wanted you to be safe. And Thrall was unable to finish. He was laughing too hard and weeping. They sat around a campfire that blazed so brightly it filled the whole plain with a warm golden light. Even the mouth of the cavern looked less grim, almost cheerful. After Thrall and Agra dressed Durak's wounds, he needed to rest. Agra had sent Rez running into the fields to gather certain revitalizing herbs. They worked together, changing bandages and fetching water. He sat close to Durak. "You slew Trigor the Lasher," he said. It was perhaps the 20th time he said it. Each time he laughed and shook his head. "You're as mad as the moons, but no one will ever question your courage." "I might test that courage by hitting you upside the head with an axe handle," muttered Agra as she began dressing another wound. "Knock some common sense into you." Then, as she heard the bitterness in her own voice, Agra snorted, grinned, and jerked the ends of the bandage tight. Durak gasped in pain. Brave young orc complaining of a scratch, she said. Raz chuckled under her breath. Durak licked his dry, cracked lips. So will you let me do the rest of my umgora? Well, said Thrall, feigning doubt. Having tasted your cooking on hunting trips, I think you preparing a meal to honor the ancestors might classify as an act of war. Raz tried not to laugh out loud, but snorted instead. Moonpaw lumbered over and sniffed the hydra blood on Durak's clothing, uttered a low growl. Durak glowered at the wolf. Does everyone in this family have an opinion? Thrall sighed. Your mother and I will discuss your umgora, and this time you will wait for us before charging ahead. He nudged his son's shoulder. Durak smiled through his bandages as the cinder of the family's fire rose into the night sky, carried across the northern barrens by the wind. Yeah, not bad. I've been noticing a thing with these stories. At least two of them. We've got some messages here that pertain to this day, really. And it's a shame that a lot of people don't really read the books for these for the game. Because we didn't go through the whole like practically Klingon type of we have to prove how tough and strong we are for glory of the Empire kind of garbage. We actually had some conservation speech in here. And that I noticed that a majority of the players on the game tend to think more like what most people had thought of, like the orcs and the horde, is that it's supposed to be about fighting and conquering and pillaging and questing and all that kind of stuff. When Lord knows, Thrall knows better. As like it has more to do with, yeah, it's more of belonging than just ousting in a way. And then the Goblin story, which is the first one we read, was about workers' rights, which we are sorely lacking and possibly could lose even further. So, like I said, it's like a majority of the horde players definitely like to play up the whole we're going to conquer and destroy and war is our master kind of thing. And it's like you need to like pay attention to what the story actually is going on here. That it's not about that. It's about how destructive and harmful it is to keep constantly fighting all the time, that it breaks people and society down. So, yeah, I'm liking these stories. I really am. Who is left? Let's see. Two. So there's supposed to be six. I think the only one that's left is the new Lothar over here. Her story is the last one to come out. So yeah, I'm really digging the stories. I really enjoy them. It's very more people centric with meaning. And I'm liking that. All right. I'm going to take a small break and then we're going to go on with Dawn of the Aspects. Hang on for a moment and I will be right back. All right. back, and this is a mess. Hang on a second. You know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm not blocking one side, but let me get chat moving. Checking over here. There we go. Chat up just a little bit higher. Yeah. There. Yeah, I think that works. All right. So, we're at Dawn of the Aspects, Part 2, Chapter 4. Kellick's starting to get lost in the sauce of the can't have the microphone there. That doesn't work. It blocks my avatar. Is getting lost in the whole thing about how the Titan artifact is kind of taking over his mind and bringing him back into the past of when the proto-dragons, who will be aspects, are dealing with their own trouble, which is Galakron. Then he's also having trouble with other blue dragons and other dragons. They just don't want to listen to him and they don't want to help. They're too busy moping about their lost abilities right now to help. So let's continue on. Okay. Continuing on. Once again, Kalik woke and covered in sweat and gasping for air. He also again woke in his half-elven form. Those things did not surprise him as much as what he saw when his eyes finally focused enough to see his surroundings. It was, as far as he could ascertain, the same canyon in which he had just left young Malagos. Rubbing his eyes, Kalik looked again at the rocky landscape. There were many changes, yet somehow Kalik was certain that this was indeed the same location. And the fact that he was so certain also bothered him. Kalik had visited hundreds and hundreds of places during his lifetime, while some, such as the Sunwell Plateau, where he had last seen Anvina, and the Nexus, were obviously memorable to him, there was no reason he should be so certain that this was the same place. True, Kalik had just visited it through Malagos a few moments ago, assuming it was only a few moments ago. But countless millennia has passed since the proto-dragon had actually been there, and in that time, nature and possibly other factors had remade the canyon over and over. Yet Kalik could have sworn on his own life that this was the same place. He spun, expected to find the cursed artifact on the ground next to him. While it surprised him not to see it, he also had no doubt that it was responsible for this little incident too. "What devilishness are you up to now?" Kalik demanded of the unseen relic. He did not expect an answer, of course. He expected only more questions, only more mysteries, only more madness. The calm, almost detached attitude that he had developed while part of the past had once again vanished with his return to the present. Now the stresses struck Kalik so hard that he abruptly drove his fist into a nearby rock wall. Had he not also instinctively shielded that fist, it would have been his bones rather than the wall that cracked. As it was, the shattering rock still splattered him in the face, making the four aspects step back in surprise. And only then did he see the footprints in the hard soil. 100,000 beasts and a fair number of sentient beings had no doubt traveled through this canyon during the vast length of time since Kalik's previous sojourn. And these prints could have belonged to any of those. But once more, Kalik knew that these were not random footprints. The first ones were those of some fairly giant creature of a reptilian appearance, a proto-dragon. Then came from the same direction for which Malagos had come in those last moments before Kalik had been thrust back into his own time and form. He even recognized places where the proto-dragon had paused before the barely seen flowing shape had fallen upon them. Thinking about that other figure, the former aspect turned his attention to another set of prints a little behind those he was certain were Malagos's. Smaller prints. The prints of a booted or sandaled two-legged form, such as an elf or a human. It brought to mind the cloaked and hooded shape that Kalik had caught a brief view of more than once, a being somehow tied to the artifact. As the Blue studied the footprints, he noticed that they went on beyond those of Malagos. Despite the ages, Kalik found it easier to follow them for as far as he could see. They continued on to the south, each step seemingly seared into the rock just for his benefit. With a bit of trepidation, but even more determination to find some answers, Kalik traced the footprints. They quickly moved beyond those marking where Malagos had stood. Kalik wondered what had happened at that point. Had the proto-dragon turned? Had he discovered whatever it was Kalik now headed toward? That he was still concerned for what had happened so long frustrated Kalik. All that should have mattered was to find some escape from the artifact's incessant intrusions into his mind before it destroyed his already wavering sanity. Kalik did not know why he had transformed into his current shape, but at the moment he found it comforting despite having to climb over several parts of the rocky path. He had spent so much of his recent past in his humanoid guise, especially when he was with Avina, or, of late, when dealing with Jaina. Once, when he had known Alexstrasza's legendary consort, Corielstras, Kalik had wondered why the Crimson Male had spent so much time in a human form, pretending to be the wizard Crassus. Now Kalik no longer questioned the preference. The path led into a shadowed region that reminded him that much of the area though which he had tracked had also once been shielded from the sun. Yet despite the obvious upheaval needed to bring down so much rock, either the prints had remained uncovered, or someone had taken time to clear the rubble away. Before he could follow that line of thought, the trail turned toward the rock face to his left. Kalik frowned, then saw a narrow cut in the rock, an opening just wide enough for him to slip into his present form. For some reason, he did not think that a coincidence. The slit proved even narrower than Kalik first calculated, forcing him to wriggle to get through. The darkness within stirred uncomfortably. The darkness within stirred uncomfortable memories of the utter blackness that overcame him almost every time he slipped from reality to the visions and back again. Kalik shivered, but pressed a few steps deeper before finally summoning a glowing sphere. In its purple light, the withered visage of a proto-dragon glared down at him. Kalik flung himself to the side, at the same time sending the sphere at the looming monster. The former spellweaver's effort changed the simple illumination spell into a full attack. The sphere exploded as it hit the proto-dragon's chest, searing into the dry flesh. A musky scent assailed Kalik as the magical energy burned into the proto-dragon. The former aspect summoned a new, larger sphere, fully revealing the cave's interior. More than a dozen additional proto-dragons, all as withered, peered at Kalik. He readied a potent spell, then paused when he realized that neither they nor the ones he had attacked had thus far moved. These were not, he finally recognized, the undead that Malagos and the others had fought. They were merely dead proto-dragons. Merely? As Kalik observed them closer, he saw differences. Each of these proto-dragons was in some way misshapen. Yet it did not look as if those defects were the result of something that had happened in the egg. Kalik eyed one proto-dragon who appeared to have a fifth limb starting to grow out of his side. Another had a third eye just above her right shoulder. What sort of macabre display is this? Kalik stared at the group and saw that each also bore some injury. As he studied one corpse after another, he saw that those injuries had certainly impaired these proto-dragons, if not killed them outright. Moreover, the former aspect saw that the dead actually lay sprawled against one another, as if they had been gathered in haste. Kalik paused again. It was clear to him that they had been steered to this place by the relic or whatever power it served, but what was he supposed to learn from this grotesque spectacle? A creaking sound set his nerves on edge and made him summon yet another spell. He turned to find the first proto-dragon tumbling forward, the damage done by the altered sphere too much for him to maintain his stability. The towering corpse struck the rocky floor and broke into pieces. The head rolled closer to Kalik, and in what remained of the second sphere's light he finally recognized the reptilian countenance. Malygos. Kalik retreated in shock, shaking his head all the while. This can't be true. It can't be. It's not Malygos. That's not possible. His mind spun. Kalik fell against one of the other corpses, which caused it to tilt into another. Suddenly all the proto-dragons began falling towards him. In desperation, Kalik shut his eyes and concentrated his power all around him. The cave filled with brilliant white energy, so bright it blinded even its caster. Gasping, the former aspect dropped to one knee. Head down, he waited for the corpses to bury him underneath them. When that did not happen, he cautiously looked up and found himself kneeling in his sanctum. At first he dared not move. Kalik shivered as he tried to verify that what he now saw around him was the truth, more than the cave had been. He felt absolutely certain that he had been in the canyon, except that would mean that the relic had transported him from one part of the world to another with less effort than it required Kalik merely to breathe. A rapid thumping sound echoed in his head. It took a moment for the blue to recognize his own heartbeat. He tried to slow his breathing, also causing his heart to shift into a more normal rhythm. His surroundings did not change. Still kneeling, Kalik touched the floor. It felt solid, but then so had the corpse against which he had fallen, and the rock through which he had slipped. This is real. This is real, Kalik muttered, this next second feeling uncomfortable at the fact that he needed to speak out loud while he sought to convince himself. But the cave was real too. It was. He could not say which was worse, the notion of being tossed throughout the world or simply being made to believe it had happened. Either way, the artifact continued to intrude too thoroughly into his thoughts. The present had become a series of moments whose lengths of stability he could no longer trust, while the visions were becoming more and more of what seemed the true reality. Kalik knew, though, that if he allowed himself to become too attuned to the visions, he might at some point never return to the here and now. The former aspect gritted his teeth. If this even is the here and now. Kalik rose and turned. The continued bane to his existence sat where last he recalled it, still gently emanating its own magical illumination. I'm tired of all these games, he shouted at him. Tell me what you want! But although it could do so much, although it could manipulate him in so many ways, the one thing that the relic appeared could not do was speak to him. Kalik? The blue male jumped. Eyes wide, he glared at the artifact, waiting for it to speak again. Kalik? The voice came from inside his head, but the relic was not the source of it. He finally understood. Someone was calling to him. Kalik knew he should have recognized the speaker. Jaina. Despite earlier misgivings about letting her potentially discover what was happening to him, Kalik now grasped at the chance to answer her call. The Archmage represented a part of that stability he fought to maintain. Jaina! Kalik called to the empty air, only belatedly realizing how desperate his reply sounded. Taking a deep breath, he tried again. Jaina, I hear you. Wait. Steeling himself, he recreated the gap in the air that enabled him to communicate face to face with her. Through it, the vision of Jaina's chambers appeared. Although she had called him, when the spellcaster first formed, she was leaning over a wide wooden table inspecting some parchment. Kalik. Jaina's initial smile faded as she looked over the former aspect. Are you sure you're well? He had thought that he had adjusted his appearance appropriately, but clearly, in some way, he had not entirely hidden the incredible stress he was going through even at that moment. I'm more... I've been under more pressure than I want to admit. Kalik began, thinking how best to keep vague, but not too vague. The Nexus. You understand. You don't have to say any more unless you want to. I'll be willing to listen if it would help. It was an offer he seriously considered, if only for a moment. However, Kalik quickly came to the conclusion that this was a matter he could not involve Jaina in. There was too much risk that she might fall prey to the artifact just as he had. Thank you for that, Kalik finally answered, trying to sound more relaxed. He remembered that he had heard her call to him earlier. His concern for his sanity briefly receded to the background as he concentrated on whatever dire problem the Archmage confronted. But enough of me. You need my help with something. What is it? Jaina looked confused. What do you mean? You tried to reach me before. I wasn't able to answer as I was this time. Her expression grew more troubled. I don't understand. I've only been trying to answer you. Me? She leaned so close that if she had actually been in his sanctum and not merely a projection, he could have touched her. You called me twice since our last conversation. I responded both times, and you finally answered just now. I called to, slipped from Kalik's tongue before he managed to catch himself. His mind raced. He could not recall reaching out to Jaina either time, instead only hearing her voice in turn. While she might be mistaken, Kalik doubted that. More likely, it was the possibility that some part of his subconscious had sought help from the only one he thought he could trust to understand the situation. He did not even want to approach the other former aspects, aware that they had some reason for making no mention of all that Kalik had learned thus far from the visions. It came to his attention too late that he had been standing in silence before Jaina. His gaze now turned to the empty air to his right. Not at all to his surprise, she was staring at him with even greater worry than before. Kalik, tell me what's wrong. Excuse me. Struggling for an answer, he blurted the only thing he could think of. The collection is more massive than I could have imagined, and the Nexus's protections are failing at the same time. It's proved to be a monumental task. Her eyes narrowed in understanding. As a sorceress, and especially the leader of the Kirin Tor, Jaina Proudmoore could appreciate the tremendous wealth of magical knowledge and power contained in the Nexus. She also understood the danger of leaving all that unguarded. I know I offered this before, but please listen this time. I can gather a number of trusted magi and lead them. No, not yet. Thank you. Kalik had become nearly as distrustful of the other magi as they clearly had been with him after his unfortunate move into Dalaran. He could not imagine that things would go well with them around him with the Nexus, and that was not even taking the artifact into account. Jaina looked doubtful about his decision, but finally nodded. All right, but the offer is open. I will see to it that any who enter the Nexus will do as they're told, but you know that... The Archmage and her surroundings rippled, grew distorted. Jaina's body twisted and her face stretched forward. Jaina? Kalik feared some force had attacked her while they had spoken. Wrong. Kalik, she answered, even as her body grew scaled and her sanctum collapsed, becoming a rocky overhang. Her robes became wings, and before Kalik's eyes, Jaina Proudmoore transformed into a dragon. No, Kalik thought, not a dragon, a proto-dragon. Kalik? rumbled the proto-dragon. He had no chance to answer her, no chance to even to dismiss the link between them. Kalik wished it closed, but lost track of both it and the altered Jaina as he felt his body shifting into a more reptilian form. Thoughts other than his own filled his head, dominated his mind. Kalik tried to roar, but his mouth was no longer his. He felt himself receding into the background, and the mind of Malagos taking the forefront. The Nexus had become a chilly seashore that reminded Kalik of the area where Malagos had once fished. Malagos was not alone. Alexstrasza stood roughly in the same distance from Kalik's host as Jaina had seen from Kalik. "I will do that," the fire-orange female said to Malagos as she rose into the sky. Alexstrasza darted off to the east, leaving Malagos on his own. What they had discussed, Kalik neither knew nor cared about. He strained uselessly to return to the Nexus, even concentrating on Jaina in the hopes that the link that had helped him at least twice would do so again. Yet, as he feared, nothing changed. Malagos took off, heading out to sea. While it was evident that the proto-dragon hunted a meal, he also appeared to be watching or waiting for something that his vague thoughts did not reveal to Kalik. That further frustrated the dragon, who had assumed that if he had been thrust back into the visions, it had been for some purpose. Kalik's host scooped up one of a pot of aquatic air breathers half a mile offshore, devouring the creature in 2 gulps. While not as delicate about his meals as Alexstrasza, Malagos did try to kill his prey quickly and relatively painlessly. Still, Kalik had no taste for the hunt right now and hoped that Malagos would either quickly fill his belly or remember something more important. The meal did come to an end, but not as a result of one of those choices. Rather, Malagos suddenly raised his bloody jaws from the second kill and peered up into the overcast sky. Kalik instantly thought of the undead, but instead, Malagos' sharp gaze fixed on a pair of proto-dragons skirting the bottom of the cloud cover. Kalik's host leaped into the air and raced toward the pair. As he neared, it became evident that there were more than 2. Kalik counted 4, but Malagos counted 5, with the 5th being none other than Ysera. With her flew Koros. Hissing, Malagos came up behind the pair. Kalik understood his caution, for other than Ysera, the rest of the party were all proto-dragons Kalik knew to be hostile to his host. Koros noticed him first. Malagos' rival sneered, then hissed warning. Ysera looked over her shoulder. Upon recognizing Malagos, Alexstrasza's sister grew visibly frustrated. "I will do this," she insisted. "We are right." Thoughts spilled through Malagos' mind and into Kalik's. Ysera continuing to search among the dead and the defeated undead for her clutch brother, despite knowing that it was unlikely she would find him. Alexstrasza's sister growing more vehemently in her distaste for all violence. The yellowish polar dragon preaching her beliefs to others and finding a few who saw as she did. And one of those appeared to be Koros, who had seemed so fanatically loyal to these names. Telenixa not all that long ago. Now Koros also preached peace, preached finding a way to live under the rule of Galakrond. His notion did not exactly match those of Ysera, but they were close enough for both suddenly to work to convince others. Malagos saw only naivety in Ysera's dreams and did not trust the mercurial nature of Koros's. Kalik now understood what his host and Alexstrasza had been discussing. Ysera's sister had been searching for her for 3 days, hoping to make her see the error of her ways before she did something foolish. To Malagos, Alexstrasza appeared too late to prevent the last. He felt that any plan hatched even in part by Koros was certain to be filled with danger and treachery. Once Malagos might have simply let things happen as they would, but more and more Kalik's host saw the intricacies involved in even the simplest decisions. The repercussions for the proto-dragon race as whole were many, Not to mention the fact that Malagos now felt a loyalty to the sisters that in some way pers- per- that in some ways surpassed even that to his own family. He had fought side by side with both of them and knew their dedication and trustworthiness. He also knew that Koros lacked either of those qualities. Sister seeks you, Malagos informed Ysera, indicating the direction Alexstrasza had flown only a short while ago. That way. Saw her, Ysera responded with a snort. Let her fly on. This startled Malagos, who knew how close the pair was despite the constant bickering. Should listen to her. Galakrond will not. Galakrond will. Her short but incredible interjection caught both Malagos and Kalik by surprise. Malagos hissed in confusion. Koros grinned but did not interrupt. There will be peace, announced with some pride. Galakrond will talk peace. You do not. She raised her head higher, taking a dominant position over Malagos. We spoke with Galakrond. He will talk peace. The madness that had affected Kalik in the present now looked as if it was taking hold of him in the vision. He could not believe that he had heard correctly, and judging by Malagos's racing emotions, Kalik's host could not believe it either. Galakrond? Talked with Galakrond? Koros finally joined in, his triumph clear in both his tone and expression. Peace we will have, if all will listen. Before Malagos could retort, Ysera said, All must listen, and we must go. Go where? Asked Kalik's host, as both his mind and Kalik's raced. Find Telenixa, she answered, as if that should have been clear to anyone. Tell her. Tell all. That said, she veered off. Koros, the other 3 proto-dragons in tow, followed. Malagos stared, wanting to believe Alexstrasza's sister, but also aware of just what a monster Galakrond had become. Still, if Ysera spoke the truth. No. Malagos shook off that possibility, and Kalik once again admired the analytic abilities of the future aspect even as a proto-dragon. However, his admiration faded as both he and Malagos thought of what would happen if Ysera did convince the others. The proto-dragon quickly turned. He had to find Alexstrasza and somehow help her make Ysera see sense. Even though Kalik's host, and Kalik too, understood the odds of Ysera convincing Telenixa and the rest of the merits of her plan, the two could not help but feel that somehow matters would end in a new disaster, and that many more, would die as a result. Malagos grew more desperate as his search for Alexstrasza stretched to hours. At that very moment, Ysera, with Koros' aid, might already be convincing Telenixa of the merit of her intentions and Galakrond's willingness to agree to everything. Malagos could foresee only catastrophe if that happened. His thinking was another example of the leap Kalik had witnessed among several of the proto-dragons. Malagos saw nothing new or odd about his considerations for the future, whereas among some current proto-dragons the here and now was all that existed. The lengthy search had had its own effect on Kalik. Able to feel the wind as Malagos flew, Kalik had calmed down somewhat. When he was in the visions, he had no choice concerning the path upon which he had been sent, and therefore tried to become as detached as he could. But yet Kalik could not help but consider the choices left to his host. Unaware of how this entire struggle had ultimately turned out, Kalik was not even certain that Malagos was right in seeking Alexstrasza's aid and stopping Ysera. Although Kalik had believed that as Malagos had when first hearing about the suggestion of peace with the marauding behemoth, he also knew that, in his time, Galakrond's skeleton lay near the heart of the dragon blight, and that the gigantic proto-dragon was considered the father of dragons. How that had come to be, Kalik could not fathom. Had Galakrond achieved salvation after all? Something that had escaped the future Neltharion and even, regrettably, Malagos himself. He forgot all about such questions as Malagos spotted a red spectre perched atop a tall hill, while While to Kalik it might have appeared to be any member of Alexstrasza's family, his host was absolutely certain that he had found Ysera's sister, and within a few strong beats of the male's wings that proved to be the case. She noted Malagos's arrival with a hopeful gaze. Kalik felt his host's guilt at coming with something other than news. "Found Ysera," he started, "with Koros." Alexstrasza eyed him in disbelief. "Koros?" Malagos quickly explained what had happened, including Ysera's current thinking. The fire-orange female hissed in growing frustration as she listened. "Must go to her," Alexstrasza snarled as soon as Malagos had finished. "This must not be." The male proto-dragon blocked her path. "Wait, Ysera will not listen." She glared at him, but finally nodded. "No, Ysera will not listen. She will die." "Will not die," Malagos insisted. "Ysera will not die." Alexstrasza shook her head. Yet rather than shove past her companion, the female photo-dragon hesitated. She wanted to believe Malagos. "Koros not good," he informed Alexstrasza. "Koros always lies." It was a simplistic declaration, but from what Kalik could glean from Malagos's memories, close to the truth. "We watch Koros, find truth, show Ysera." While Kalik's host did want to help the sisters, the icy blue male also looked forward to revealing his rival as he knew it to be. Koros was one proto-dragon Malagos could not have minded being devoured by Galakrond, provided Koros could be prevented from rising from the dead afterwards. Cocking her head, Alexstrasza considered his words. It did not take her long to nod eagerly. "Yes, prove Koros false. Ysera will see truth." Kalik was not so certain about the merit of Malagos's suggestion, but he distrusted Koros as much as Malagos did. Kalik suspected that Koros thought he could take advantage of everyone, even Galakrond, while raising his status among the other proto-dragons in the process. It was a foolish, dangerous notion. A familiar roar thundered across the heavens. Immediately, Malagos and Alexstrasza dived from their perches into more shadowed regions below. Neither proto-dragon cared about dignity. Malagos found an overhang that had enough room for one and left it to Alexstrasza, who reluctantly accepted his sacrifice. The male moved on until he came to a depression in a hillside. It was not large enough to fit him, but he nonetheless planted himself against it, and then held his breath. And barely had he done so that a darker, vaster shadow engulfed everything. A hulking form covered the sky. Galakrond on his endless hunt. Despite his much too near proximity to the insatiable Leviathan, Malagos forgot his danger as details of Galakrond's underside swept past. The smaller proto-dragon even slipped out of the depression as he stared at the growths more and more dominating Galakrond. Growths that had an odd resemblance to unfinished body parts. Kalik watched with equal horror as Malagos glimpsed one rudimentary limb after another dangling from random locations. There were forelimbs in hind with partial paws. Vestigial wings flapped futilely in the wind caused by Galakrond's swift flight. What might have been a partially formed head, thrust out of a region near the behemoth's hip. There were other shapes that neither Kalik nor his host could identify, but that both assumed were just as unnerving. Malagos sat where he was, entirely oblivious to the fact that all Galakrond had to do was glance back and see him. Fortunately, the gigantic proto-dragon continued on, not only racing beyond view mere seconds later, but also heading in a direction that would not set the two smaller ones on the same path. Malagos exhaled as Galakrond vanished. Then he quickly joined Alexstrasza. "Must go now," the fire-orange female urged. "Now, before Galakrond comes again." "Now," agreed Malagos, following as Alexstrasza took off. However, unsaid by the male proto-dragon, but sensed by the ever-present Kalik, was the thought that even if the pair flew faster than Galakrond, It might already be too late to avert catastrophe. The two proto-dragons headed toward the region where Tolonixa had previously called the gathering. It had not yet been discovered by Galakron, but Tolonixa had already used the growing risk of that happening to stir the other proto-dragons toward mounting their attack. Her sense of urgency, fueled by her desire for vengeance, clearly still prevailed. "More of us here," she roared. "So many more! Galakron cannot fight all! Cannot!" Pardon me 1 second. Allergies killing me today. Anyway. Proto-dragons everywhere hissed and roared their agreement. Kalik judged that Tolonixa had been speaking for some time, which gave credit to not only her relative eloquence, but also to her continued dominance of the other. "There!" rumbled Alexstrasza. "There! She is there!" Following her gaze, Kalak's host beheld the smaller sister not far from Tolonixa's rocky perch. Koros stood next to her, his three comrades a little farther back and looking as if they did not wish to be anywhere near the pair. Both Malagos and Kalik found that odd, especially where the trio's leader was concerned. Why avoid Koros? Tolonixa hissed in pleasure at the gathering's response. Koros chose that moment to ease up to her. He leaned close and whispered in her ear. Her black eyes narrowed as they fell upon Ysera. Koros immediately retreated, his expression veiled. The dominant female unleashed a mighty roar that made Kalik's host cringe as he landed, for surely every living creature within half a day's flight could hear it. Still, out of respect to Alexstrasza, Malagos did not depart for safer climes. Instead, he alighted with her at a place where they could view the tableau unfolding. "This runt speaks," Tolonixa declared, with one wing indicating Ysera. To Alexstrasza's sibling, she curtly added, "Speak!" Ysera looked to Koros, who merely nodded. Alexstrasza growled low at the male's action. "He leaves Ysera alone." "That is Koros." Malagos had already expected his rival's support of Ysera to be weak. Koros would do what he could to deflect focus away from him unless it served to raise his status. If Ysera managed to sway the majority, Koros would suddenly be there beside him. The yellowish female pulled herself up to her full height. While she was not a very impressive proto-dragon when compared with Tolonixa, there was something in Ysera's manner that Malagos and Kalik found admirable. Weak though she was, Alexstrasza's sibling had an inherent determination that made her seem larger, more dominating than she physically was. "We are many," she began, her first statement receiving a chorus of approved hisses. "We are many, but Galakron is Galakron." The last approving hisses faded as the gathered proto-dragons tried to digest what she meant by the last. "Galakron is strong. Galakron is powerful." "We are many," one of the listening crowd roared back. Others hissed in agreement. "We are many," Ysera replied with a nod. "And many will die against Galakron." Several of the listeners glanced with unease at one another. Seeing this, Tolonixa unleashed an angry hiss. Ignoring her, Ysera pressed her case. "Many can be saved. Peace will save them." She stepped toward the thickest part of the gathering. "Must talk with Galakron. Galakron talked before. Remember when Galakron was with us, hunted with us. We talked peace. Galakron will listen." A thundering laugh cut her off. Tolonixa looked around at the other proto-dragons as she mocked Ysera's earnest words. "Galakron will listen? Ha! Galakron hunted with us. Galakron now hunts us, yes? Listen? Never." Ysera tried to interject, but she was drowned out not only by more laughter from Tolonixa, but also by the laughter of those joining in with the larger female. Alexstrasza growled. She started forward, clearly wanting to stand by her sister. Malagos cut in front of her. "No, Ysera will not like that." The fire-orange female almost snapped at him, but then she hesitated. She eyed Ysera, wanting to comfort her, then finally nodded. Yes, would not like that. Never liked that. Malagos and Alexstrasza, and Kalek, who initially had expected Alexstrasza to fly to Ysera, something he would have done in her place, could only watch as Ysera's effort fell apart. Ysera looked crestfallen and confused. She glanced around as if seeking someone who was clearly not there. Koros, Kalek host grumbled. Where is Koros? Indeed, the other male had vanished at some point, along with his 3 comrades. Malagos searched the gathering and caught a glimpse of what he thought was one of the trios disappearing over a distant rock. Before he could decide what to do, Talanixa seized control of the gathering again. With a tremendous roar, she silenced those who had been mocking Ysera with her. No peace, she called. Never! Galakron hunts us. We now hunt Galakron, yes? Roars of approval reverberated through the area. Ysera, her head hung low in a submissive posture, crept back. Alexstrasza, looking more distraught than ever, pleaded with her eyes to Malagos. Kalek's host nodded. Yes. Now good. As she rushed to console Ysera, Malagos quickly sought out Neltharion. Finding neither him nor even the brown male Norse Dormo, Malagos climbed down from his perch in search of them, just as Talanixa took further advantage of Ysera's failed attempt for peace. We were many. We will win. Attack now, urged one proto-dragon. No, I decide. Others come. 3 suns pass, and we attack. Galakron falls. Malagos paused at hearing this decision, the first time Talanixa had proclaimed it. He hissed, not liking that things were abruptly moving so fast. As the other proto-dragons drank in this grand proclamation and began to cheer, Malagos caught sight of Koros himself. The other male's head had risen above an outcropping farther to the north. Koros immediately sank out of view, but without seeing that Malagos had spotted him. More distrust of his rival than ever, even in this dire time, Malagos scurried faster among the rocks. He did not want to be seen in turn. Koros intended something sinister, and both Malagos and Kalek were in agreement that he needed to be followed. Crawling along the landscape like one of the tiny lizards that made for the good occasional snack, Malagos circled around the area, seeking some hint of Koros or his companions. In the background, Talanixa continued to proclaim to the other proto-dragons. While Malagos could not understand her words anymore, her tone preached triumph over Galakron. Pushing aside all thought of what would happen 3 suns from now, Malagos increased his pace as best as he could in such an awkward position. He yearned to fly, but dared not until he knew where those he hunted were. Kalek, with no body of his own, more than understood. Then, as if something sensed their desire, a single shape rose in the distance. It was followed by a second, then a third and a fourth. Koros and his followers flew low and quickly vanished over the northern horizon. Malagos kept equally low as he pursued. He still had no proof that Koros was up to something, but the simple fact of it that it was Koros was all that mattered. Kalek mostly knew of the other proto-dragons from Malagos's memories, but what little he had seen of Koros matched well with what his host thought of his rival. Malagos wished that he could have located at least Neltharion, but there was no time. Koros' speed indicated urgency. Malagos needed to know where he went, and because of that, so did Kalek. More than once Malagos lost sight of the 4, but persistence enabled him to regain the trail each time, until the point when they descended over a series of ridges. Malagos hissed angrily as he smelled the air in hopes of locating the 4. He knew Koros' stench well enough, yet he could not locate it. But another unsettling scent wafted past his nostrils. It was fainter, yet so distinct that the proto-dragon could not help but focus on it. There was something about it that spoke of a strength different from that of one of his kind. Despite wishing to follow Koros, Malagos veered toward where the scent had come from. Kalik, too, was intrigued, but for other reasons. There was something familiar, not in the scent, but rather in its very existence. Malagos followed the trail a short way before it abruptly vanished. He alighted on a high rock and searched his surroundings, but saw nothing, and he suddenly had the sensation that he was being observed. The proto-dragon quickly peered over his left wing, both Kalik and his host expecting to see nothing, yet this time they were wrong. The figure was tiny in comparison to the proto-dragon, but neither Malagos nor Kalik truly believed that it lacked the power to confront Malagos should that be its desire. While the proto-dragon vaguely recalled a glimpse of this creature, it was Kalik who was most stunned. It was the same figure he had seen in other flashes of vision, even in his own time. "Who are you? What are you?" Kalik demanded uselessly. "Who are you?" Malagos also demanded, echoing the thoughts he could not have heard. "What are you?" Even as repeated Kalik's questions, both found themselves staring at empty space. However, barely had this registered with Malagos that he noticed the figure at the edge of his vision. Turning that way, the proto-dragon again confronted the billowing shape. While Malagos tried to make sense of not only the rippling appearance, not having any notion of what garments were, but also the creature's ability to vanish and reappear elsewhere, Kalik noted the powerful magic the mysterious form wielded. Powerful magic that might, at some point, have created the infernal artifact. When the figure did not answer, the proto-dragon snarled and leapt closer. The cloaked and hooded form vanished again, this time reappearing farther to the southeast. "It's leading us somewhere," Kalik thought. The answer that he so desired looked to be just beyond the nearby rocks, answers that might end his curse. A hiss arose from the direction in which Malagos had flown. Kalik's protests were unheard as his host immediately reacted. Although it was only a hiss, Malagos knew who had spoken, knew all too well. There was no glimpse of Koros, but Malagos was certain he had heard his rival near. Kalik's host leapt into the air to give chase, then hesitated as the memory of the mysterious figure resurfaced. To Kalik's relief, Malagos looked back, but of the figure there was no sign. It did not reappear anywhere. That decided it for Malagos, if not Kalik. Koros was again the subject of his hunt. Malagos's rival had to be very near. A proto-dragon of Koros's coloring briefly rose above the hill ahead, then dived down. Malagos dropped to just a few yards above the ground. A sulphuric scent assailed him as he neared the area. Malagos was not familiar with this region, but he knew of some such regions. The world was unstable there, sometimes as violent as a beast. After landing against the hillside, Malagos drew to the top. He heard voices, one of them that of his rival. The proto-dragon bristled at the sound. "He comes here, always comes here," snapped Koros. "We should not be here," protested one of his followers. The protest was followed by a snarl and a whine. As Malagos thrust his head over, he saw Koros living over the proto-dragon who had complained. That proto-dragon now had a long bloody gash across his forehead. Nearby, one of the others watched the pair with some trepidation. Of the fourth, there was no sign. "We will live," Koros sneered. "They will die. All will die. We will live." The other two nodded. As they did, they all took turns looking to the north. Malagos also looked and saw a dark, massive shape forming on the horizon. "He comes," Koros hissed triumphantly. "Koros calls him, and he comes. Galakrond comes." Galakrond? Malagos stiffened. Kalik would have done the same if it had been possible. Koros had summoned Galakrond? Malagos and Kalik had expected treacherous behavior from Malagos's rival, but neither had thought that Koros would have the audacity to reach out to Galakrond on his own. This could have nothing to do with either Ysera's hope or Talanix's plan, except bring both to ruin. Malagos cautiously went wended his way down the hillside away from Koros as quickly as he could. The proto-dragon's mind raced as he tried to decide what to do. This was beyond the sort of plotting that even Malagos would have anticipated from his rival. There came an angry hiss from behind. As Malagos started to turn, another proto-dragon, the missing fourth, crashed into him. Malagos tumbled and plunged through what had initially appeared to be solid ground. The proto-dragon battled to free himself, but succeeded only in becoming more mired in the soft, hot, and sticky tar previously hidden under a thin layer of normal dirt. Gasping for air, Malagos managed to briefly push himself to the surface. As he did, he and Calyx saw two things. One was the fourth proto-dragon vanishing over the hill towards where Koros and the other two waited for Galakrond. The second was a short, so very short glimpse of the hooded form peering down at the struggling Malagos just before the ground again swallowed him up. Calyx watched as the world vanished in darkness. Yet this time it was the smothering darkness of the tar pit, engulfing not only his host but also Calyx, who, despite his every effort, could not wake. Alright, that's part 2. Hang on. Let me dig up part 3. Three. And open. And we're at the end of that one. Hang on. I read this a long time ago, so that's why everything needs to be reset. Come on. There we go. One second, we'll start up. It's the internet for you. Sorry if I sound a little extra nasally today. That's some allergies. Like as soon as I close the door, it seems to just trap all the dust in here and it's just being circulated by my fan. Alright. Jaina Proudmoore left her meeting with the Council of Six with the subjects of that convocation only briefly still in her focus. Her thoughts quickly turned to a more personal matter, one that had intruded more than once during the gathering. Calyx, even before his recent unsettling behavior had begun, he had filled her thoughts more often than not. Jaina still vividly remembered that kiss just after he had asked if he stood a chance not only with the other magi, but most important, with her. She had answered him by lifting her face towards him, and he had responded as she had long hoped. At that moment all had seemed right with the world. But since his troubled departure, things had gone awry, and now this had happened. While Jaina knew that she could not take time away from her duties for a personal matter, Calyx was still the former aspect of magic, and thus privy to many of the secrets gathered by him and his predecessor, especially his predecessor over the countless millennia. A wealth of magical power that could potentially wreak havoc upon the world was under his control that was slipping more and more with each passing day. It behooved her for that reason, so the Archmage convinced herself, to find out what was wrong with him. But if he cuts contact off each time I try to find out more, simply reaching out to him was not enough. If she wanted to find out what was actually happening, the Archmage had to take a different course of action, and in her eyes, there was only one course. Suddenly eager to return to her sanctum, Jaina picked up the pace. She already had a plan formulating, one that made absolute sense to her, and one that Calyx would probably not like in the least. He was suffocating. Calyx was suffocating. It mattered not that it was Malagos of the far, far past who was actually the one struggling for breath. Calyx experienced everything that the proto-dragon did, and that made him wonder at that dark moment what would happen if Malagos perished. A part of Calyx knew that such a fate had not befallen his host, but another part of him, the part that most dealt with the immediate lack of air, still questioned whether both of them might yet die. Malagos shuddered as he sank deeper into the cloying tar into which he had been pushed. Kalik expected the proto-dragon to black out, but instead, Malagos startled his unfelt companion by exhaling what air was left in his lungs. But what at first Kalik took for suicide was instead the proto-dragon's attempt to save himself. Head pointed up, Malagos used his last breath to unleash frost. The force of his icy exhalation not only cleared the air above his head all the way up, but also cooled the sides of the gap solid. Sucking in the air that filled the narrow passage, the proto-dragon bent his head down and exhaled again. The molten ground froze just enough, exactly as Malagos intended. He broke free and immediately shoved himself up. Below, both Kalik and his host could already sense the ground shifting again. Malagos pressed harder. The passage was too narrow for him to twist his head down and exhale again. If he was to escape, he had to move even faster. The opening beckoned. At the same time, a rumble rose from below. Hissing, the proto-dragon dug in his claws and pushed up the last few yards. He thrust his head out of the passage, then dragged the rest of himself free. The rumble grew thunderous. Although still fighting for breath, Malagos whirled around and exhaled at the opening. The frost covered the hole just as it filled. The ground sealed. Malagos spread his wings and took to the sky as the frozen pit shook. He rose higher and higher, both he and Kalik hoping that the freeze would last long enough. The pit exploded, a molten column shot up into the sky. Malagos managed to dodge the column just before it reached him. He flew as hard as he could go in the direction he faced, even though it meant heading in the opposite direction from where he wanted to go. Only when the proto-dragon hoped he was far enough away did he look back. The column appeared to veer toward him, but at last seemed unable to hold together any more. It collapsed, spilling over the area of the pit and far beyond. Exhausted, Malagos alighted on a ridge and tried to focus. Taking a deep breath, he exhaled over his body, freezing the tar in most places. That done, the proto-dragon shook hard, sending much of the stiffening tar scattering. The effort cost him, though, and he had to use a few more precious minutes to recoup. Kalik felt every bit of his host's weariness, and the proto-dragon's increasing impatience. Malagos wanted to follow after Koros, but he still needed to regain his breath. That meant he would risk losing his rival's trail. As good as tracker as Malagos was, the stench of this region mostly masked the other proto-dragon's scent, very likely what Koros had intended. His breathing finally regular again, Malagos leaped into the sky and headed in the general direction of his rival. Hang on a second. Getting that darn tickle again. Excuse me. There was, of course, no sign of the floor, but Malagos pushed on. He continually smelled the air sinking some hint of any of the other proto-dragons. But it was another scent that finally seized his attention and gave him a possible trail. It also presented him with the choice of fleeing to safety or rather toward the jaws of death. Galakron was somewhere far ahead. Part of Malagos shrieked that he should turn back, a part that Kalik found quite sensible. But another part urged the proto-dragon on. Malagos recalled what Koros had said about Galakron. If Koros had come this far, he would not stop until he achieved his goal. And if that happened, the other proto-dragons would become easy prey for Galakron and his new followers. Malagos flew low and fast, eyes now seeking an object in the sky. Aware of how swiftly Galakron himself could fly, Malagos knew that he would have very little chance of escape should the gargantuan proto-dragon spot him. Everything Malagos planned revolved around seeing the behemoth first. Kalik searched his host's mind for details of what he planned and quickly discovered what Malagos's strategy consisted mostly of finding Galakrond and taking it from there. While Kalik was well aware of how adaptable the future spellweaver could be, seeking out the monster terrorizing the land was, to the Blue Dragon, insane. However, as always, the choice was not Kalik's. He could only pray that history would be as he recalled it, and he was questioning those recollections more and more with each vision, and that Malagos would survive. Survival did not seem a trait of his host, as the proto-dragon pushed harder and harder, almost as if eager to confront Galakrond face to face. The landscape changed more than once as Malagos followed the behemoth's odd and unnerving scent. In addition, the fresher the trail, the more Malagos began to notice the wrongness of that scent. There was a sense of decay, as if Galakrond himself were dead and yet was not. Moreover, there was something else inherent in that scent that to the proto-dragon felt twisted, frightening. Evil was not a concept understood much by Malagos's race, but Kalik recognized that it was that very notion that his host sought. Whatever Galakrond had once been, and Malagos's memories indicated a past in which the Leviathan had been thought of as almost benevolent. He had crossed to a darker path at some point. Much like Deathway, Kalik thought with growing horror, but in some ways worse and more primal. Why this had never been passed on to the Blue's own kind plagued Kalik despite his own trials. What had made the original aspects and the other first dragons agree to keep this terrible era a secret from the generations to come? Malagos came to a sudden halt. Kalik belatedly sensed that mixed in with Galakrond's ever fresher scent and what a trace of another scent Malagos recognized. Not Koros, but one of those with him. The blue and white proto-dragon banked, following that scent. Although the essence of Galakrond still prevailed, the other scent began to take on more freshness. Other smells joined it, among them Koros's. Then another, fouler odor caught Malagos's attention. He immediately descended. A pair of undead proto-dragons dropped down from high above. Their claws just missed rending Malagos's wings. With ragged hisses, they pursued him to the ground. Through his host's eyes, Kalik sought out some place for which to better defend himself, only to bitterly recall that he was not in command of the body he inhabited. Had he been, a natural stone arch to the west would have been his choice of destination. Malagos headed for the arch. Kalik could not be at all certain whether Malagos had made the same choice on his own, or whether the proto-dragon and he somehow had been for a moment as one. Kalik settled for hoping that the arch will prove the correct decision. The two undead were right on their tail and gaining. Malagos darted through the arch, then immediately rose. Spinning in the air, the proto-dragon landed hard, paws first, on the arch. Kalik felt every bone shake from the impact and hoped that his host had not badly injured himself. The arch collapsed. Tons of rock rained down as the two undead, relentlessly pursuing, passed underneath. The rubble pressed the foremost pursuer to the ground below, where it reduced the corpse to a pulp. The collapse did not entirely catch the second undead, but it did throw the fiend out of control. The animated corpse crashed into one of the fragmented arch walls. Already inhaling, Malagos dived after his pursuer. As the undead attempt to right itself, Malagos unleashed the frost. The undead's movement slowed. Malagos increased his velocity. He tore into the fiend before it could recover from the blast, biting into the throat and tearing at the chest. The dry scale and flesh gave away easily, but that did not mean that the corpse ceased its assault on Malagos. The effects of the frost faded. Even with its throat nearly torn out, the undead tried to bite into Malagos's wing. Claws sought his own throat. Thrusting his head into the chest cavity, the proto-dragon clamped down and ripped out everything he could. As he pulled out, the upper part of the body collapsed into the ruined chest. The undead's flailing head snapped up. Malagos finished decapitating the creature, letting the head fall to the side. The ravaged body continued awkwardly seeking him. The proto-dragon shifted and the body stumbled past. But as Malagos did that, a sharp pain coursed through his left hind paw. He roared in anguish as he fought to shake free the tightened jaws of the head. Blood poured from where several teeth had punctured the proto-dragon's hide. Seizing the jaws, Malagos finally pried them loose. He threw the head away as far away as he could. His injured paw throbbed. Blood continued to flow. Malagos studied the wounds, then carefully exhaled. A finer stream of frost blanketed the injured area. The coolness eased the throbbing and helped slow the blood flow, which finally stopped on its own a few moments later. Kalik felt the pain every bit as much as Malagos did. As it was, he was grateful for whatever the coolness did to ease matters. The wind coursed through the region. Malagos sniffed the air. Both noted the clear scent of Koros and some of his followers. Why they had diverged from their pursuit of Galakron, neither Kalik nor his host could say, but the two were of one mind in wanting to find out. Not desiring to fall prey to another trap, Malagos took a circuitous route that also prevented his own scent from drifting back to his enemies. As the proto-dragon neared, a new powerful scent joined that of Koros and the others. The scent of blood. Very fresh blood. That disturbing scent was followed by the snarling voice of Koros. What the other proto-dragon said was not clear, but he was obviously angry. With great caution, Malagos peered around the rocks. His eyes widened. Koros and his followers were not alone. Between them lay a juvenile male of Alexstrasza's family. There were also two more members of Koros's family, one of them a female slightly smaller than the group's leader. She had a look of sly pride on her countenance that appeared to both Malagos and Kalik to have nothing to do with Koros's anger, which was evidently focused on the two of the other males. "Do it," their leader growled. "Must be done this way. Galakron did it this way." The juvenile tried to rise, then slumped. His savage wounds now revealed themselves. His chest had been torn open and his wings ripped apart. Malagos's gaze shifted to the new pair, where he saw that both had claws stained with crimson. "Brought him here for you," injected the female, taking up Koros's cause. "Now eat." Malagos recoiled, and if Kalik could have done the same, he would have. Neither could believe what he had heard. The other proto-dragons remained hesitant. The female looked at Koros, who hissed. In doing so, Koros revealed that his teeth were as red as his claws. Without warning, she lunged at the wounded juvenile's throat. As the other males, except for Koros, recoiled with much shock, as Malagos had, the female ripped out a monstrous chunk of flesh from the side. With great gusto, she tossed it up, then let it fall into her gullet. She swallowed it whole and sneered at the rest of the party. Malagos wanted to go to the aid of the juvenile, but knew not only that it was already too late, but also that he would simply be throwing his own life away. Kalik understood that, but suddenly wished that he stood beside his host. The two of them together could have taken Koros and his party. That he was certain. And yet he could do nothing more than Malagos, who shared his frustration and horror at watching the butchery. One of the hesitant males finally lunged. He ripped a mass of flesh from one of the juvenile's arms. As he swallowed it, the rest finally joined in. The feast proved too much even for the stalwart Malagos. He turned away and quietly retched. Kalik experienced every raw emotion as Malagos fought to come to grips with the atrocity Koros had led his followers to perpetrate. Proto-dragons did not devour proto-dragons. Yes, they tasted the blood of their rivals in duels, but even when a duel ended in death, it did not continue with the consuming of the dead. Not at least until Galakron. Malagos stiffened. Galakron. Neither Kalik nor his host could have imagined the situation worse than it was. But now it came to both of them that what Koros intended was for him and his followers to become like Galakron. Shuddering, Malagos forced his gaze back to the scene. The fire-orange juvenile had mercifully died and no longer suffered as bite after bite was ripped from him. Koros's followers quickly left little behind beyond bones and torn skin. It was Koros who brought an end to the hideous tableau. Muzzle soaked, he raised the ruined head by the jaw and tossed it aside. Done! All done! We grow stronger! We see it soon! Soon, the female echoed. Soon, the other repeated. Koros stretched his wings. Now you see how Galakron will not eat us. We are like Galakron. We will be with him. He will not eat us now. This encouraged even the most reluctant of his followers. The gathered proto-dragons raised their heads and hissed as one. Koros then took off, the female immediately joining him. The rest followed, leaving in their windy wake the jumbled remains of their victim. Malagos almost gave chase, but suddenly found himself drawn to the ravaged corpse. The pungent odor of fresh kill filled his nostrils. For reasons clear to neither Malagos nor Kalik, the proto-dragon bent to investigate the grisly pile. Kalik's host sniffed the juvenile's remains and then, on impulse, seized one of the bones in his jaws. Barely had Malagos done so that the proto-dragon spit the bone out. Even then, though, there was a desire to take it or another piece and work what fragments of meat remained off of it and into his gullet. Both Kalik and his host recoiled at that idea, yet Malagos had to fight hard to pull back from the corpse. Hunger filled him, a hunger that revolved around more than merely the eating of flesh. Malagos yearned to taste something else, something that Kalik first recognized. Malagos hungers for the juvenile's lingering life essence. The blue dragon could feel the proto-dragon straining not to tear at the remains in search of what little had not faded away. Stifling a roar of anger, Malagos turned and flew from the spot. At first, he simply flew as far as he could from the corpse, even though that took him in the wrong direction. Only after the wind in his face cooled Malagos enough did the proto-dragon finally arc back toward the path Koros's band had taken.